Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today on this BIST Career Webinar. Before we start, let me remind you of some good practices that will help us all have a smooth online experience. First, please make sure your microphone is muted at all times. Secondly, disable your camera and keep it off throughout the whole webinar. In third place, take note that if during the discussion you have any questions, we will be collecting them through our chat function. Use the private chat to send your questions to user BIST. I will make sure to compile the questions and share them with our speakers during our Q&A session. On this occasion, in order to better orientate the Q&A question session, we have prepared a very short Kahoot poll, which you may access through the link in the chat. Please take 1 minute to answer it in the following half hour. We will present the results before the Q&As. Before presenting today's session and our speakers, I would like to take this opportunity to put this webinar in context and introduce the framework that BIST, together with the 7 BIST centers, are putting together in the area of career development. At BIST, we are highly committed to promoting our scientific talent. This webinar is part of a series to share the experiences of researchers who have continued their professional paths in different roles and sectors, and share useful and necessary information on how to approach this turn in careers with us. We are, of course, open to ideas and suggestions of topics which satisfy your interests. So please feel free to reach us out at any time with your comments. And with this, we now may get started. Today, we have with us 3 scientists who are currently leading their own research groups. They will share their own experience, giving us insights on their steps and motivations, and some tips on which are the skills required to apply and to become a group leader. We will discuss questions such as which are the best career strategies to reach the position of group leader, which are the main requirements to be eligible, or how to navigate through a selection process. To talk about all these and other interesting topics, we have today with us Dr. Michel Krieg, Group Leader of the Neurophotonics and Mechanical Systems Biology Lab at the Institute of Photonic Sciences, ICFO. Dr. Lorena Dieguez, Group Leader of the Medical Devices Laboratory at the International Iberian Nanotechnology Laboratory. And Dr. Elena Martinez, Group Leader of the Biomimetic Systems for Cell Engineering Lab at the Institute for Bioengineering of Catalonia, IBEC. This said, I invite Dr. Krieg to take the lead and welcome him to speak.
Thank you very much for the invitation and for giving me the opportunity to share my little 2 cents to the community about how to make the big jump from a postdoctoral scholar to an independent career. And I would like to start by sharing my screen, which you should see now. Can you please confirm that you see that? Okay. So I arrived at ICFO pretty much 3 years ago, and now I consider my lab more or less running on a variety of projects that all revolve around the use of light and force to discover understudied but important aspects of biology. This is actually not what I'm going to talk about today, right? Today we're here to have a look how I actually arrived here to Barcelona and ICFO in particular. So in order to get a little bit of a picture about who I am and where I come from, will have to go long back in time. And I would actually start with my undergraduate education, which I did in a little university town in Germany, in Kassel. And there I started studying biology with all the classical disciplines that come with traditional biological education, botany, ecology, zoology, and so on, you name it. But after, say, 2 years, I decided that I really would like to dig a little bit deeper and get more to the fundamentals of what holds life together. And I started majoring with something that got momentum back then, and it was called Bionanotechnology, which explores biological functions using tools, physical tools borrowed from nanotechnology, I would say. So this is then also where I did my my master thesis. It's a combination of physics and biology, and I used an atomic force microscopy tool to measure the mechanical properties and material properties of biological cells. And for that, I moved to Dresden, where I stayed, and also for my PhD. So I continued the same line of education. So I used these nanotechnological tools to interrogate biological functions and could identify new properties, and really mastering or familiarizing myself with interdisciplinary work, right? So it was a fusion, say, between nanotechnology. So my advisor was a mechanical engineer by training, with developmental biology. So my second advisor at the Max Planck Institute, he was a biologist working with zebrafish. So I really like this interdisciplinary working environment, and I decided then to continue working interdisciplinary in a different realm. So I moved for a postdoctoral scholar to the US, to Stanford, where I then wanted to learn more neuroscience. And so I branched out into a different part of biology, and really got a very intensive training in neuroscience and bioengineering, where did little things of what I did before, right? So I learned all the basics biology, what makes a neuron, and so on and so forth. So the goal here was then to get to know a new model system with what you saw crawling actually down in my bottom slide. So a little worm that now pretty much determines or seems to determine the rest of my life. So it's a C. elegans, a very well-renowned model system for neuroscience and biological function. After the postdoc, I got a chance to stay at Stanford as a principal investigator with the help of a transition grant. So it was actually really called Pathway to Independence Award for a postdoctoral scholar to get experience with budget management and developing their own research line that then would carry you along into your own lab, which would be a tenure track position, preferably in a different institution. So for that, I again set out to acquire different expertise to develop microfluidic tools, which I then could apply for neuroscience and mechanobiology. So this award was obviously only possible in the mentored environment. So I didn't have the capacity to hire my own people, but with the mentoring agreement in my host lab, it was working out pretty well. So it was a good opportunity for me to learn a new technique that I didn't know about before, and concentrate really about the process of acquiring or basically jumping into a new position, which I then was lucky enough to get here in Spain at ICFO, where I more or less continue the same research line. So using an interdisciplinary approach to interrogate biological functions using force and light. So this start in my independent lab was greatly facilitated with an ERC starting grant, right? And this is also something that will come back later, which pretty much was a door opener for many things I was using, was applying to later on. So to summarize the trajectory, right, I started out as a biologist and learned different disciplines along the way. So we got familiar with physics and nanotechnology and doing my PhD and the postdoc. I got the principles of engineering and microfluidics, and all these tools now I try to apply as a PI for biological problems. So now this is enough detail about who I am and where I come from and all the steps, the career trajectories that I took. But now you might be curious a little bit about what was actually the process of getting them from a postdoc to an independent position. And I already mentioned that earlier. I mean, it's not really like there's not really a golden advice or a single advice that would help you to achieve this step. So it's really a long process, and it might actually go back really to the PhD or even earlier. So, but to summarize for what I did in my postdoc, because this is actually where it crystallized for me, it was a little bit unconventional because I divided it into two phases, right? So I had the classical postdoctoral training, which for me took more or less 4 years, and was the boundary condition that was a fellowship that supported me financially. And after that, it's normally that people would apply and go to their independent professor position. So in the US, back then I applied to the Pathway to Independence award that would then grant another 2 years of a mentored PI position in the same host institution where you were as a postdoc, right? And this was very convenient for me because it not only gives, I mean, it's a award that may make you more competitive on the job market, but it also allows you to provide you more training, more tailored towards jump starting your own career, right? For example, during the time I was able to apply to an ERC starting grant, and that's a more lengthy process, and so I had the possibilities to do it there, and with the help of this ERC application submitted, I could then go on the job market, and that really helped a lot to just as a door opener for the hiring committees to hear you out, to invite you and consider you on a potential shortlist. So the other experiences that I personally took away from that hiring process is that for many committees and personal experience, I found out that the reference letters are very, very important, right? And sometimes one tends to underestimate the importance of these letters, and even what it goes that it goes back very early in your career. And very often the hiring committees would require an explanation for so when you don't give a recommendation letter from your PhD advisor, right? So this is quite important. It seems to be logic, but it's very very important. So a part of that, there are many little details that seem to be obvious, but really having experienced the importance of them can just not be emphasized enough. And one of those is, for example, the cover letter for your transition for your application. And so during the whole application process, I received many advices from different people, and one of the advice that I got is to apply broadly, right? And so whenever I applied broadly and didn't tailor the cover letter to a very specific position, then that was always not rewarded with a good outcome. But actually, most of the time, when the cover letter was really tailored to a specific position, that ended up with an interview. So having then sending out 70 or 100 applications, so some people they do that, and that really doesn't make a lot of sense, and that should be clear. then so during this cover letter, then obviously there's several information that need to be transmitted. So like creativity, your trajectory, and things that you consider that would make you stand out from the crowd and your peers, right? Because good references, good letters, good papers, they are necessary. But since there's a pool of very good applicants all the time, it is not necessarily sufficient for the entire process. A part of all these skills, right, that you would think they are necessary to achieve faculty positions, like research and teaching and all the experience going abroad, maybe having a good CV. And there's a lot of soft skills that I found very helpful that are necessary and that helps you to actually succeed in your professional application life. So one thing that is very, very crucial is writing, right? I mean, a well-written cover letter is worth more than a paper, for example, or something else. So if you can convincingly bring up your point in a short amount of sentences, then that is very, very much worth it. During the interview, you want to excel with your presentation, and for me that has been a continuous process. So obviously when I started applying, and by the end of my application round, I was giving a different impression, giving the same presentation, and that naturally comes with practice. But there's also something you can proactively do. And what I did is I took classes, right? So I back then in Stanford, the theater and psychology department, the undergrads would offer one-to-one consulting for scientists and non-actors to actually give presentation. And so I basically met with these undergrads from the theater department and presented my scientific talk to them. So they would give me feedback about body language, a slide layout, literacy, and so on. And graphic design is also very important to convey the information on your slides without getting overburdened or whatsoever. Other soft skill, I mean, it might be just very banal and obvious to talk about. I mean, obviously you want to have a little bit of a network to thrive and live in science. But I wouldn't necessarily say it is very, so I mean, it's like subtle but efficient in that networking opportunities, right? So you can share experiences with your peers. For example, the ERC grant that I wrote during my postdoc was with other people that are at my same stage, and we wrote it more or less together, sharing feedback and so on. Another interesting point that you might be interested about is for the reasons and the motivation why people actually want to go from a postdoc to an independent academic career. And these reasons might all be personal, but there are, I think, also common points in everyone, right? I mean, for me, some of the things that I really was longing for is to put all the ideas into action in terms of research, right? I always had the feeling that I wanted to do more things that I was capable to, and acquire, or basically having a lab with the collaborators inside and outside of the lab would help me to actually put these ideas into action and share expertises that I don't have and so on. Along those lines goes the desire to always acquire different expertise and skill sets in a professional life. And I would say the last thing that mentions is that I always like to I thought of that research was within the bandwidth of my previous training, right? I mean, if you look at my trajectory, I mean, it was always very research heavy, and so I thought this is what I was very well prepared for. But obviously, research is only a fraction of the duties and the responsibilities that you have as a PI. So the role as a PI as a PI group that goes much more beyond than the actual research. And so that could actually be then the basis for the discussion in the follow-up of this presentations, to also talk about the different roles, what the PI needs to perform and live up to in this role. Okay, for that, I would like to close, and I would also encourage everyone, so if you have questions that are not covered in that discussion, then to always reach out to me. So my email is visible, and you can go to the webpage and always chat me up if you have any more questions. And with that, I would like to give the mic to my colleagues back again. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Krieg, for your insights. May I now invite Dr. Lorena Dieguez to share her experience. Thank you.
Hello, I think I have managed to unmute my mic and also to share my screen. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share my experiences with you today. I have prepared a small presentation to guide you through, to this, that is my experience. So, okay, a little bit about my personal trajectory. Right here. So I am actually a physics graduate from the University of Santiago de Compostela. I started in 1999 and actually finished with what is called nowadays Bachelor and Masters in Optoelectronics in 2005. Then, before I moved to do a Master of Science with research work involved, I actually did a couple of internships, first in the Optics Institute of the SIC in Madrid, and then in the University of Barcelona in the group of integrated optics. And that gave me a very good idea that I really wanted to do, to pursue a PhD. And that's how I moved to Barcelona to do the first stage of the PhD that is now called a Master's in Nanoscience and Nanotechnology at the University of Barcelona. And from then I started working in collaboration with the ETH in Switzerland, and also with the IBEC, with the Institute of Bioengineering of Catalonia. I can say that my whole PhD was developed between these three organizations. And I finalized a PhD in nanoscience that was mainly devoted to the development of biosensors. And I finished in 2010 without submitting my PhD, but that's another story. And I moved to a postdoc in Australia, and I worked at the Young Work Research Institute for 4 years on a very multidisciplinary project. So I had already been moving from physics into optics, into micro nanofabrication, and into bionanoengineering. And through this postdoc, I was working a lot with microfluidics and with clinical samples, in this case for isolation of rare cells in body fluids. And it was then at the end of 2013 when I saw an advertisement for a position of what they called a junior group leader or a staff researcher at INL. And I applied and was lucky enough to get the position that I started in January 2014. But let me tell you a bit more of the insights. So first of all, let me tell you that INL is a very new organization. It's located in the north of Portugal, but it's actually an Iberian institution. So it was actually funded by the governments of Spain and Portugal, and it's fully international and solely devoted to the area of nanotechnology. And this is very important because it was quite crucial when the institute was formed only in 2011 to start hiring researchers from all over the world to populate the building and to actually be able to tackle all the areas of research that it was set forth. So the current research group that I lead is the Medical Devices Research Group. And what we do is a panoply of technologies. I like to summarize our research line in these four. We do biomicrofluidics applied to body fluids. So we basically isolate biomarkers of interest for diagnosis from body fluid samples. We develop plasmonic sensors, mainly based on SIRS, to quantify in a multiplex manner these biosensors. We also develop organ-on-a-chip systems to study diseases. And we develop optical instrumentation to be able to map processes at the subcellular level. But it was not like this. It was not like in 2014, I started working at INL, and all of a sudden I had access to my research group with all these research lines. So let me just tell you how we got from that in 2014 to this nowadays. So I was hired as of January 2014 as a staff researcher, but that only gave me a 2-year contract and nothing else. So it gave me no money, it gave me no group, it gave me an empty laboratory. And it was up to me to convert that opportunity into a tenure track position. So working a lot on my own, I managed to get my first publications out in 2015. I started participating in research projects that were already granted or that other colleagues of mine were leading. And through collaborations, I managed to get myself into research projects that gave me money so that I could hire the first person for my, let's say, mini group in 2016. In 2017, I landed my first project as PI. And in 2018, already with a group of, I'd say about somewhere between 8 to 10 people, I got to be recognized as a research group leader and to get my own group from the area in which I was working. We kind of moved outside. And finally, in December 2019, I got my tenure position. So you see that it was not, in my case, just automatically just a position of independence. It was just an opportunity. How was I recruited? There's different ways that you can land this position of opportunity, either through fellowships that give you this position of independence together with money to realize your research activities. Mine was not the case. In this case, it was just an open call for a staff researcher that gave me 2 years of salary to develop my own project. In this particular case, they were looking for a particular skill set. They wanted to learn to develop a research line in microfluidics applied to medical and biological research. And I had the technical skills that were set that they were looking for: micro nanofabrication, microfluidics, biosensors, bioengineering, nanomedicine. I also had experience in cell culture with clinical samples. So I mean, let's say that I had the package that they were looking for. The track record was also important, but I didn't have a mind-blowing track record when I was selected. So for them, it was actually more important, not the track record in the publications, but rather the skill set and the other complementary skills that I had. Motivation, international experience. I had lecturing experience that allowed me to work very closely with universities. I have had experience supervising students at master and PhD level. And what I think is mostly important, I already had experience leading my own research lines. So while I was doing my postdoc, I had the opportunity to win 2 research grants in which I was the PI, junior PI. Of course, those were small grants, but I had the opportunity to land a project with the DIEDG. So this is a collaborative program between Germany and Australia that actually funds interchange of students and researchers. And I applied with a very short research program of my own activities, so separated from those of the PI of my group in Australia. And I managed to get my first research on my own there. And then I also got a research project from a private foundation that funds ideas for junior researchers, in this case in the field of prenatal testing. And I think that that was mainly what made the difference between myself and probably the other people that were with me applying for this position. So showing already some level of independence. Well, how can you be prepared? So provided that there's opportunity, how can you be the person selected? Well, I think that it's very important that you have international mobility. So within your experience, but also that you're willing still to move. Is going to be very difficult. Let's say, you know, if you have made your career in Barcelona and you've never been abroad, is going to be really difficult for you to find your perfect, you know, group leader position also in Barcelona without moving around. So I encourage you to do so, not only because of the international experience, but also because that comes together with a lot of language skills that you're going to learn, as well as flexibility. And you need to be flexible to be in research, let me tell you that. I'd also like to point out interdisciplinarity. So if you've been working on just the one field of research, I think that it's time to, you know, get to know complementary skills. Those can make the difference between other researchers and yourself, and that certainly give you a broader perspective. And that can be really, really important in order to develop your independent research lines. That brings me to the third topic, which is actually independence. I think that if you're a postdoc, you are already entitled to apply for your own research. You can start participating in European or national calls as PI. You can, those can be fellowships or as well as research projects. So, you know, just try your luck. I think it has been said already. Go out, be exposed, network, and start applying for projects of your own that follow a different research line than that of the group in which you currently work. And I would also encourage you to be creative and ambitious. With that, I mean that, you know, you may try to complement your skills with, for instance, entrepreneurship, if that is something that is interesting to you. If you're working in basic research, not applied research, then, you know, why don't you learn complementary skills? Like, why don't you go to synchrotron? There's tons of fellowships to go there to do some experiments. Just try to do something a bit out of the box. And then what happens next? So let's say that you get the position, what can you expect? In my particular case, I was alone in my empty laboratory, but slowly this grew up to be a research team. And certainly the type of work that I do nowadays is very different to that I was doing, you know, 6 years ago. And so you need to have skills for team management. You know, this is something that perhaps you have never come across, but it's not easy to lead a team. And so I encourage you to complement your skills with perhaps training in team management and project management. Why not? Soft skills are going to be very important, and that's you know, that's for instance, time management capabilities is going to be of the essence in your new role. Get ready to do lots of administration. That is going to depend a lot on the institution where you are going to be developing your work. Some of them have more, some others have less support, but there's no doubt that you're going to be doing much more administration than that you do as a postdoc. And also be ready to apply for funding. So there's some positions that come with a tenure track, you know, funded position, but those are mainly not the case. So if you don't have to fund yourself, you do have to fund your group. So be ready to apply for funding. So the earlier you start doing so, the better, so that you get familiar with the work programs, both at national and international level. And this is just a cartoon so that you realize that the world is perhaps not how you imagined it, and so that you're ready to take on the challenge. If you do believe that, you know, that you want to be a research group leader, go for it. And, you know, talk to your colleagues, and talk to, you know, your current group leader, talk to other people like us. Like, we are going to be approachable not only today, but also outside of this webinar. And we are happy to solve your doubts and to help you out in this career. that's it from me. And I'm happy to pass the word on to Elena Martinez, who was actually my co-supervisor in my thesis. So it's always a pleasure to share the floor with her. So I'll just stop my screen and stop my video.
Thank you, Lorena. So let me see if I can start sharing my video, my screen, sorry. Okay, so I hope you can see my screen. Can you confirm it somehow? Yeah, okay. So my name is Elena Martinez. I'm a group leader of the Biomimetic Systems for Cell Engineering group at the Institute for Bioengineering of Catalonia, IBEC. And I'm also holding a position of Professor Agregado, Associate Professor at the Department of Electrical and Biomedical Engineering of the University of Barcelona. So this is a picture which is not totally updated, but it's the picture of the group that I'm leading at IBEC. And I'm not really talk a lot about the things that we are doing as a research in the line in the group. But in the first part of my talk, I just wanted to briefly give you just a summary of my career. And then later on, I was asked by the BIST managers to try to give you my institutional view from IBEC of what we are looking for when we are launching a call for a junior group leader. So just let's start first telling you a little bit about how did I end up here. So I started by doing a bachelor's in physics at the University of Barcelona. And that was a 5 years degree at the time. And then I chose as a major electricity and electronics, although there was a lot of material science also involved in that major. So this gave me a background, I would say, in electronics engineer that then I used in my PhD in physics that I also did at the University of Barcelona. So in there I learned mainly surface characterization and thin film deposition. So I was working with very hard thin films, totally inorganic compounds. And during my PhD, I had 2 experiences abroad at Berkeley, where I learned nanoindentation of hard materials, and Uppsala University, where I was introduced to the work of microfabrication in clean rooms. And that I used also in my first postdoc, where I was at the EPFL, doing electrical and optical characterization of thin films, and also clean room fabrication. So let's say that during this period of the thesis and postdoc, I acquired a lot of knowledge on microfabrication and characterization techniques. And during this time, and I think this is also important, I was also combining this with some teaching. So I did some teaching at the UB in the degree of physics, and at the UPC in the material science department. Then when I came up from the EPFL, I joined a new structure that was being created at the time in Barcelona. That was the Barcelona Science Park. And I joined the Barcelona Science Park as the head of a new unit that was called the Nanotechnology platform. That was basically a clean room of micro and nano fabrication that was open to many users. And then by the time, I also got a Ramon y Cajal researcher position. So at this time, I was learning a lot of micro and nano fabrication techniques. I also got familiar with microfluidics, and I still continued working in the clean room environment, but I moved from the inorganic applications to the biomedical field. So I would say that in this part, I learned how to apply microfabrications to biomedicine. And that continued when IBEC was grown. So first of all, I was a senior researcher at a very large group of Professor Josep Samitier. And in that group, I was already in charge of a specific research line of the group, dealing with cell biomaterial interactions. I did also a lot of biosensors, surface functionalization, and micro and nano patterning. And by that time also, I moved for a while to the Imperial College in London to get some more experience abroad, specifically in the biomedical field that I didn't have. And then I continued my path, and I became first a junior group leader at IBEC, and then a senior group leader at IBEC. And mainly now I'm working on biofabrication and tissue engineering. And as I said, I'm also a professor at the university teaching mainly at the bachelor and the master degree. So during this time, my skills were devoted to bioengineering, and I complemented that not only with the teaching, but also with supervision of a lot of degree students and master students and PhD students. And I have to emphasize that during this process, while I was a senior researcher, so not a former PI, and even before when I was a Ramonica Hall researcher, I did a lot of extensive training on writing and management projects and proposals, because you have to write a lot of proposals to finally get a project coming in. And so I've been PI and I'm PI of RETOS projects, so Spanish projects, collaborative European projects, ERC, and FETOPEM project that I coordinate. So also at IBEC, and this comes to the second part of my talk, I'm holding the position of Deputy Director for Talent Attraction and Training. And in this position, I'm involved in many of the selection committees of the very different programs. So from master programs to PhD international programs, to our Marie Curie Co-Fund program, and even the Junior Group Leader program. And I'm also involved at other levels of a selection committee of the BIST, for instance, in the master program. And I have also to say that I'm also involved as a manager for the Spanish ministry, so in the Agencia Estatal de Investigación. And in there, I manage a subsection together with other colleagues, of course, a subsection in the materials panel, specifically in the biomaterials section. And in there, we manage national projects, so from the RETOS Call, Explora, etc., but also personal grants such as the Juan de la Cierva or the Ramonica Hall, and also other programs such as the excellence certificates that you may know, for instance, the I3 certificates. So for those that are not that familiar with IBEC, just very briefly tell you that we are 22 research groups and around 370 people working at IBEC from many different nationalities, and that we are doing interdisciplinary research in future medicine, active aging, and regenerative therapies field. So from this perspective, when there is a call for a group leader at IBEC, a junior group leader, what we are looking for. So first of all, we look for somebody that can lead an interdisciplinary research group in the field of bioengineering or nanomedicine. So this is very important for the institutional fitting. This person has to be responsible for one or more research lines, and it has to fit in with the IBEC strategic framework, but having a total independence in their research field. So as a group leader in this position, or as a junior group leader, which are the tasks that are expected from you to fulfill? So this is what we expect from, in brief, what we expect from a group leader. And in here, we've tried to kind of quantify and describe more in detail what actually the other speakers have already said. Just let me go quickly through this. So suppose that researcher, you were dividing your time in a certain functions, but now this shift of time changes a little bit. And as a PI, you are expected to devote 25% of your time to lead and coordinate research. And this includes providing ideas and vision, to manage the group members' training and the supervision of the results, including providing feedback to the people that is in your team. You are also expecting to devote quite a large proportion of your time, up to 20% of your time, to funding management. And this means to have ideas, to find possible funding sources for these ideas, to have networking and build consortiums, to write and defend projects, and to also have you also have to do the scientific and sometimes assist with the budgetary justification of your project. You will also are expected to devote some time to networking by identifying potential collaborators, participate in the competent forums, and follow up and manage of your contacts. You will be also asked to participate in dissemination activities, and this implies to identify valid forums and journals, to prepare and give talks, to do publications, of course, and outreach activities. This human resources management, it's quite a different in time and consumption and energies from what you are expected to do as a postdoc. So in here, we estimate around 20% of your time will be devoted to this. And this includes recruiting, integration, motivation of your team, also conflict resolution, also training, supervision, and administrative requests that they also take a little bit of time. Then you will be also entitled to do external evaluations up to maybe 5% of your time. So this means that you have to read the material, to review the material, and to assist with the decision-making process and communication of the decisions. And also scientific assessment, again, around 5% of your time. So this implies advice, for instance, the board of IBEC, or participate in IBEC activities or group leader meetings. So this is what is expected from you, but then how can you join, or how you should apply to IBEC group leader positions? So usually our positions for group leaders, we have been open around 1 call per year, and the timeline is not like set on stone, but usually at the beginning of the year is when it happens, sometimes a little bit sooner, sometimes a little bit late. And they all appear published in the website. So you can go there and find all the details about the position that it's open. Some positions, they are for a particular topic, such as the one that we opened this year, that it's for chemical biology. But some of the positions are just open for any of the fields in which IBEC might be interested. Of course, if you are out of the scope, this is going to be very difficult because institutional fitting is important for us. And in here, well, you have some of the details of the selection process and what we can offer, and how to apply. And if you go in here, you will find, for instance, very important details about that you should always take into account and respect when you are applying for a position like this. About the deadlines, how the process is gonna take place. So in our case, for instance, we do first a remote evaluation, and then we do a short list of the candidates, and then later on, these candidates, they will go through an interview, and from there we will select the proper candidate, and there will be some offers, one offer made, and well, maybe some candidates in the reserve list. And one thing that it's important here is that, for instance, for IBEC, we are not only looking for excellent candidates, but we are also looking for excellent candidates with an excellent research proposal. So there will be not only your CV that you will have to introduce in here, but you will also be asked to apply for a research proposal. And this is very important. Apart from outstanding scientific output, the candidates that will be successful, they have to prove that they are active in the application of competitive proposals as principal investigators. And this you will find that it's almost a requirement for, I would say, from the Ramon y Cajal positions up into the scientific career. Yeah, and that was pretty much everything I want to tell you, and I will looking forward for your questions. And then I'll stop.
Thank you all 3 speakers for your valuable experience. It has been a real pleasure listening to you today. So before we start with the Q&A, we have already been receiving some questions. We will share with you the results of the Kahoot. May I also ask the other 2 speakers to put their cameras on for the Q&A? Okay. So to the question, are you considering to push your scientific career to get a group leader position? 7 replied yes, 4 replied no, and in the near future, another 4. Okay, so about half and half, let's say. To the question, have you ever applied to a junior PI or junior group leader position? Most have replied no, one has replied yes. And to the question, are you aware of national senior postdocs or group leader programs such as Ramón y Cajal, ICREA, or Iker Basque? Most of you actually, yes, have an idea. Okay. Thank you, Donna. Now, we'll go into the Q&A. I have put together some questions that have been arriving, and we will try to discuss them all. If we don't have enough time, I think we will. I also encourage you to reach out to our speakers through their emails or their lab web pages, and they're more than open to reply to your questions and comments. Okay, so this is a very interesting question from Adriana. She wants to know, how do you consolidate a research idea to make it your own line of research? So who would like to start answering this?
Should I? Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So how do I consolidate a research idea to make it my own? Well, I mean, this is well, a tough one, right? Because ideas don't fall from the blue sky. So it's a long process, and it involves a lot of iterations and back and forth. And most of the ideas that I'm doing or the project that I'm doing in my lab right now, they developed as a postdoc, right? Over the 6 years that I was there at Stanford, it was basically the based on results or observations I acquired there. There's of course a few things that you are required to start from scratch, right? From completely new, but it is very difficult to start a lab from absolutely zero, right? If there's no preliminary work, if there's no results that you can rely on, and so on and so forth, right? If you start everything from zero, then that's going to take obviously longer.
So I can continue if you want answering this question. So to me, what and this is what I've seen also in a lot of the selection committees. For an idea to be considered as your own, you have to prove that you have the leading position, mainly in the publication of the paper. So if you don't have a leading position, so for instance, you are not the corresponding author, it's difficult for a selection committee to know what's your real contribution to that idea. So this is important. And to take this leadership position as a postdoc, if you are not the PI, this is going to be a little bit tricky from the very beginning, because I mean, you don't have the money to pursue this research, but you have a very good idea. So my advice would be talk and negotiate with your PI. And I'm sure you can achieve, you can arrive to a compromise, and you can even get something that it's in the benefit of both. So both can share, be corresponding authorship in a paper, or I mean, there are many ways of achieving a good deal. But it is, I mean, very important for somebody that wants to become a junior group leader to show that level of authorship in a paper, for sure.
Yeah, I was literally going to say the same as Elena, but I think that besides the order in the publication, there is of course important to show the transition to seniority. Funding is also equally important, because it might be that the current project in which you work cannot allow for side activities. It's often the case that you can, you know, get a new master's student to pursue some ideas that you've got, and if you have a good relationship with your supervisor, you should be able to have, you know, the possibility of running these lateral experiments. But if that's not the case, there's plenty of programs for small funding to be able to just make a few experiments to check whether an idea or not would be valid in the laboratory, and I certainly encourage to pursue those open calls.
Thank you to all. So following on what Dr. Dieguez said, let me just remind for those of you who are postdocs at BIST that we do have the BIST Ignite, and we welcome projects from postdoctoral researchers. Okay, the next question is for our female group leaders. It is, it says, did you find more challenges or faced more obstacles in your career to become a group leader because you are a woman? And if so, what would you advise female scientists who would like to become a group leader in order to overcome such obstacles? What has been crucial for you to make this step forward?
Lorena, maybe you can start.
Me?
you have it more difficult, so.
Yeah, okay. Look, at INL, there's 24 research groups, and out of the 24, there's 4 groups that are led by women. I have little more to say. It's a tough career, and it certainly does not help that often the age in which people go to this more mature, independent position so happens to be the age of motherhood, if that's what you decide to pursue. So I mean, the only advice that I can give you is to, to be surrounded by a good and comprehensive partner, so that shares the load, because that certainly, parenthood is often something done by 2 people, not always, but often it is. And taking care of the children should also be a shared thing. But we, all research group leaders will tell you that they work endless hours. And so you also need to be prepared to share the ride. Is actually, I would lie if I say that, that you are competing with people that work 8 hours per day, because that's not true. So you have to take very smart decisions on what you do. You have to surround yourself by people that you look up to. And you have to have a tough skin, because the competition is fierce and it's not easy. And it's often still the case that the group leaders that are male have a better salary. I don't know, I guess that in most institutions that's not the case, but it's still in many. So yeah, I guess that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, the problem of being a woman, if there is a problem, I mean, the main issue is of course with the motherhood, because I got my child, for instance, very late in age, so I was almost 40. But then I had to say that, with less time, you learn how to manage. And this is important. Time management, which is something that you don't have time right now. So you have to manage in a very efficient way. And this is something I learned. So I don't procrastinate anymore. If something is in the agenda, it has to be done at that time, because probably I will not have the time tomorrow. Or maybe the kid is sick tomorrow and I can't go to work and I can't do what I was expecting to do. So I'm not pushing deadlines anymore. And in that sense, being a PI, it's an advantage, because you organize yourself the time as you want, and you decide which are the grants that you want to go for, which are the grants that you don't want to go for, and with which time you want to do that. So there will be, of course, some hard times in which there are unforeseen things that you didn't expect, and then they come, and you will have to react, and maybe the reaction time, which is something that I think is affected because of these circumstances, is not going to be the same, and we cannot lie on that. But on the other hand, I think working, I mean, for somebody as a senior researcher, maybe that you cannot maybe decide for yourself, and your time is not your time, I would say, is managed by somebody else. It's more difficult. When you have your own time, I think with if you organize yourself in a proper manner, it's a little bit not that hard, I would say.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question for the three of you is, what is the most exciting and the most difficult part of your current position?
I guess Michael should take this one.
Well, there are many exciting moments. So I guess the exciting moments always come with discovery, right? I mean, if there's something that you didn't expect to happen in a way that surprises you, and then you look at this from many different angles, and then you realize that it actually makes sense, right? So that nature again convinced you that you don't understand it in a way you wanted to understand. So that you really learn something. It's a very rewarding moment. And I guess this is probably what everyone keeps everyone alive who's doing research, because this is what we thrive on, and it's a feeling that makes you keep going despite all the disappointments that come with research as well, right? I mean, it's not only living on the bright side. There are so you can easily get discouraged and distracted by many things, right? And I'm not only talking about say grant rejections or the paper didn't get accepted and so on and so forth, right? I mean, this is kind of like everyday business. I mean, like, that's what we deal with all the time. But it's like, for example, like what's very discouraging or very hard to deal with is if you realize that the project is not going in a way that you also conceived it, right? And then you don't get it on the right track, because there's a person behind it who's not only you. So you have a responsibility for everyone that you're mentoring, that you're advising, that you're guiding. And if it's not only you in that position, then it's a tough one, right? Because you want to make the right decision at every moment in time, and sometimes that's out of your control, and that's not so nice. More?
Elena,
Yeah, I don't know, maybe. Okay, so to me, there is a lot of satisfaction, but this is something which is very personal. So particularly, for instance, today, I'm very satisfied that Lorena is here, you know, so she was my former PhD student. So I assume that at some point I had some positive impact in her career. And this is, I'm assuming, so no, nothing else. And this is something which is very important for me. So what it comes with the science that you do and with helping people growing their abilities. And so this is very important and very different when you are a group leader than when you are not a group leader, because the impact that you might have on people and that your decisions might have on people, they are very different. Because of course you are in a different position, you have more power, but also more influence on people. And once you are in that position, you have to be really aware of what's this impact on the people that it's under your supervision. So it really, it's a pleasure to see how people that were at some point crossing during my supervision, they now grow and they can, do much better things that I will be able to do in research. So this is something that for me it's very important. And the negative part of my of this experience probably has also to do with human research management, and it is mainly to be when somebody approaches you and asks you for, and people that are under my supervision and ask you for your realistic feedback, on which pathway to follow, if they will have possibilities to do so, this and that. And then you have to be at some point kind of not discouraging, but at least honest, So in the sense that, look, yeah, you can, maybe your goal is to go there, but then first you have to move and do this and that. And maybe this was not in their, in the pipeline. This is not coinciding with the pathway that they want to follow. But I think at some point, if they require this advice, you have to be honest. And sometimes the few things that I had to do that was very hard. And again, it's a duty of the group leader. If they require from you to do that.
Okay. Our next question. How do you build an efficient network to support your promotion and grow your position?
This is external network or internal network?
Both. Your network.
Okay. Look, I think that one of the best things that I did when I got the position at INL was to engage with the European technology platform in nanomedicine. So I was coming from abroad. I was coming from Australia. I was not familiar neither with the funding opportunities in Europe, neither with the community. I left as a PhD student and I came back as this junior, staff researcher, whatever. And so I needed people to know me and my capabilities. My institute was also not known, and I needed some vehicle for exposure. I mean, there was many things that I did. I was teaching in many universities, engaged in many master programs, both in Portugal and in Spain. I live in Galicia, so I teach in several of the Galician universities and got any opportunity to be exposed. But I think that this ETPN was very important for me to get to know the people that actually work in nanomedicine in Europe, and to start working, to start being known, so that they would invite me to their projects, so that I would be able to invite them to the projects that I was leading, and in that way to learn and to grow and to thrive in the at least in the funding ecosystem. That was essential for me.
Yeah, if I might add in that sense, one way of building at least a network in Europe to apply together for projects is to go for a coordination of the project. So if you are the coordinator, usually everybody says yes. So this is a way. Maybe the first time you start or you try this, the project is not gonna move forward because you don't have experience, but there is a first step. And usually it's very difficult to be invited to be a partner of, for instance, a European consortium, but it's not that difficult if you are the coordinator to get people on board. And this is like a first step to start something in which you will be recognized as the leader, even if you failed in getting the project, but you will be starting new collaborations on your own. And in the European arena, it's not like in the Spanish arena, in which we have, I mean, I think in Portugal it's a little bit better, but in Spain, you basically cannot be the PI of a national project if you don't have a permanent position. So this is very difficult. I mean, there are some projects, the John Research program and so on, but they are very restrictive, and it's like something that is, I would say, minimal. But for the vast majority of the funding, you will not be able to access unless you are a permanent researcher as a PI. So, but in the European, at the European level, this is not like this. So as long as you have like a nice idea and you have the willingness to participate, you can just move forward and go there. So I think this is a way of starting, and you can start by your nearest community, trying to approach people that that they have to build this networking, and asking for them for their advice and what they will do in that situation, and then try to find some niche in which, I mean, you are not going to apply to everything because this will require a huge amount of time. But if you select properly some goals, or if you select properly a particular project, it's worth it. My advice is that if you have to work very hard to get a project, you better try to get a project with a decent amount of money, and not waste a lot of time in many small proposals that in the end, they will have even less chances of success and you will invest a huge amount of time for a minimal amount of money. But this is, again, a very personal opinion.
So Elena, now that we have you here with the microphone, a question for you. Could you please explain a little bit how the evaluation process of a program like the Ramón y Cajal works, and what is exactly expected from the applicants?
Yeah. So the evaluation, basically, when you submit a Ramón y Cajal proposal, what you submit is your CV. So this is the first thing that it's evaluated. And therefore, in your CV, you also submit like a highlight of your most significant achievements. And then all this information, it's kind of compiled by panels. And then the panels, they will put together all this information first in a quantitative manner. So there's a lot of indicators for that they are evaluated in a I would say, comprehensive manner. So from the number of publications, number of papers that you have as a first author, number of papers that you have as a corresponding author, age index, citations, which is the impact in the field. If you have invited or not to any conference, this is also important because it means that your work as an individual has been recognized. And then, of course, if you got some funding for research. Of course, things such as Marie Curie, especially if they are individual fellowships, or Juan de la Cierva, they might be evaluated as positive, but the problem is that the competition is so huge that in the end, if you don't get even a small project as a PI, it is very difficult that you might end up getting a Ramón y Cajal grant. So what I'm saying is that actually the candidates that they succeed, they are excellent and they tick all these boxes. So it is very difficult that a candidate with just only excellent publications, they will be given a Ramón y Cajal, at least for instance, in the materials area. So you really need to tick all the boxes because there will be candidates that they will tick all the boxes and they will be filling out all the positions that are available. So unfortunately, it's like this. So it's also very nice that you know what indicators that are being evaluated, and then you try to identify by yourself in which you might be a little bit weak with enough time to be able to improve it, and then invest your time wisely towards your goal. Because if you don't know how are you going to be evaluated, then it's going to be very difficult to really, maybe your time instead of the final publication should be invested in getting a grant as a PI, because this is what you're looking for. Or you have to insist in getting an invited talk in a conference, something like this.
Okay, thank you, Elena. Now for the three of you, you're here giving advice to a large group. If you could actually go back in time and give advice to a younger you, what would this piece of advice be, and at what stage of your career?
Me, I would say that at some point in my life, I had to, I was like getting a position of senior researcher, and I was too comfy in that for some years. And I didn't have the ambition to move forward. And if I could go back in time, that could be the part that I will maybe do sooner.
Lorena, Michael, any insight?
I'm still thinking.
So, there's one advice that I was given when I started my lab. It was actually pretty very much at the beginning, so a month after that. And I was talking to a colleague, and he said, "So which conferences are you going to?" And I said, like, "Oof, like this C. elegans conference, and then this Forest conference, mechanobiology, like all different things." And he was looking at me and said, "You know what? you should pick one field and then cure a community in a network, and because they are the people who are writing your letters for your tenure, they're reviewing your papers, your grants, and so on and so forth. So cure your community, right? And so I guess if I was as a postdoc or a PhD student, I would probably try to cure more a specific community, and I somehow is lacking behind that specific comment, probably also because of the interdisciplinary of the science that I've been doing. But I mean, I think this is an advice that could help for junior scientists to take serious. And I see that the colleagues who really have invested a lot of years in that network building within that same community, they well, I mean, that really is a good thing.
So I've been thinking, and just to select the one, I think that the years that I spent as a postdoc, as a junior postdoc, could have been way more productive. And I think that I should have been more critical on how I was spending my time. So I was in a situation in which I was managing a laboratory, I was mentoring several students, I was in charge of many equipment, I was in charge of you know, some projects, and I think that I didn't I didn't look into the goal, let's just put it that way. I just you know, spent those years working without keeping my mind focused in what I wanted to achieve in terms of outputs. And I think that I wish I would have known there to focus on, I don't know, on that publication finished, on, you know, perhaps not helping that much this or that student, and focus on you know, getting the experiments finished and things like that. So you know, be very conscious of your time and how you spend your time, because every day counts.
Okay, thank you all three. The last question. This is a futuristic question. It says, it seems that there are only few positions for group leaders right now. Do you have any idea what will be the scenario in the next few years or in the upcoming years?
I don't think it's going to change. I mean, it's a pyramid. No, I mean, it's not being pessimistic. It's just, you know, but I also think that there's a lot of people that are very, very, very valuable that are perhaps not considering a career change, but maybe because their supervisors are not honest enough with them, or maybe because they have not tested other you know, scenarios, and they are just afraid of change. But there's you know, whoever with a PhD and with postdoctoral experience is a very valuable professional. And what I think should change, and I believe will change, is that more and more PhDs should be hired to work in the industry. And that's well, I don't want to go into COVID, but you know, it's necessary that more and more highly educated people work in industry in order to achieve the best. And so, you know, academia is not the only way forward.
Yeah, well, also, I don't think there will be more PI positions in the future, at least in the immediate future. But definitely, maybe not PI, but positions that are at the intermediate level, because it's not, I mean, for some people, they to become a PI, and this was my situation also at some point, become the PI was the only way of getting a non-temporary contract, so an indefinite contract and a permanent position. That was the only way. And that's why that was my main motivation to become a PI, honestly. But there might be at some point some other ways of also getting a valuable contribution to the scientific landscape. not necessarily being a PI, but also in the stages of, tenure scientist or a senior researcher, or even at the university if you become an associate professor, or so there are other ways. And these ways, I think there will be opportunities in the very near future, in the upcoming future. And this is just looking at the population at the PhysIC and at the universities. So there's a lot of people that that they have to retire. It is like this. And for instance, at the universities, the number of students is not going to decrease, at such a dramatic manner that no more teachers are going to need to be hired. So my advice is stay tuned, because sometimes, for instance, you don't do, like, I don't know, you don't require a certification of the I3, or you don't have your certificate to become from the ACU or from the ANECA to be a teacher at the university, or you have like things in your career where you already have all the merits, and you just don't go in the administrative way. And sometimes it happens that whoever gets there and finds the opportunity, just because of serendipity, it gets it, and it is not because it didn't he or she didn't deserve it. I'm not saying this, but sometimes to be in the right place at the right moment is also important, and you need to be prepared. So just be aware of that and the requirements for each of these positions, and do all the necessary steps that sometimes imply to fill your CV in the most unconventional formats, and repeating the information once and again. But still, if you do this, then you might maximize your opportunities, and this is what I think it will happen.
Okay. Well, again, thank you, Michael, Lorena, and Elena, for your time and for your collaboration in today's BIST Career webinar. I hope you enjoyed participating as much as we did listening to you. We will soon be sharing the recording of this session through the BIST social media channels. In the meantime, stay tuned for our next career webinar, which will take place on the 22nd of June. On behalf of BIST, I wish you a wonderful evening, and we hope you and your loved ones stay safe and healthy. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.